Well, it looks like we're live. How
We're live.
exciting. Hello, everyone. We're live. So I guess we'll do just to start off with just a welcome to everybody. So welcome to the first Commercial Obsession edition with Lori Keel. We're going to spend about half an hour talking about all things commercial strategy and diving into the impact in the industry, the hot topics of the day, all that good stuff. A couple of real quick housekeeping notes. We are going to talk for about 15 minutes or so about halfway through. After that, we're going to dive into questions, comments, topics from you guys. So in the chat, if there's anything that you wanted to ask, any topics you wanted to breach, anything along those lines, please go ahead, type them in as you think them, and we'll be going into those in just about 15 minutes. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and kind of start us off. So Lori, we were talking a little bit before about just this really interesting evolution that we're seeing in our industry with the commercial strategy. And you've been touting commercial strategy for a long time, much longer than it's really been a topic or anyone even knew what it was. But it's been taking a foothold recently. Any thoughts on kind of where that's been coming from? Why is commercial strategy all of a sudden the hot topic?
I think because it was identified by HSMAI first. That's when I first heard about it. Obviously, it existed long before hospitality took hold. It obviously, if you look at like Ernst & Young and any of those types of companies have had commercial strategy in the fold for a long time. But the first time I ever heard about it was at an HSMAI commercial strategy. No, it wasn't a commercial strategy week. That's what it is now. It was the revenue optimization conference. Mm-hmm. And they kept calling us commercial. And I remember it was a little bit annoying to me. I'm like, what is that? Why? Why are you calling us that? That's so weird. Like it would just seem so foreign to me. But then when I realized that it was the way in which we were identifying how these three distinct departments could work together under one umbrella, I jumped on really quick because I think that it is the difference between going to batting practice, right? You know, you love my analogies. Going to batting practice and, swinging to a machine versus joining the team, right? Getting on the baseball team and actually scoring and being able to compete. And that's what that became for me was, wow, how could we be so much greater than we are individually if we were all to get under this commercial umbrella together? And I think that's what a lot of people started to recognize. I think there were a lot of people that were in the audience like me at that rock conference going, what is this? And why don't I know about it? What do I need to know so I can stay relevant? You know, that little streak of fear that goes through you when someone says something and you're like, I know I should know that. And I don't know that. It was that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you grabbed hold of it and brought it back to the office. And how do you start that? How do you initiate that inside an org?
Yeah. For me, it's like I do everything. I'm a student at heart. So the very first thing I do is start to research. I start to dive into reading all that I can find. But additionally, I try to find people that share that passion for research. And in my case, that was easy, right? I have an amazing team and they're all very curious and they're very tenured in their careers. And one of the key attributes that they all share is that we're very willing to be vulnerable together and say, like, I don't know what this is. Do you know what this is? And what do you know about it? And well, here's what I know about it. And in that, it really just bred this curiosity that then started to unfold for all of us, where we could start to understand, like, oh, wow, what if marketing was part of the strategy? What if a marketing plan included the transient strategy and the group strategy? What might that look like instead of it just being a marketing strategy? And so it was just little tiny baby steps until we could start to see we were moving. in a direction. And in that, there were a lot of collisions, right? There was just a lot of times that we just absolutely butted heads and things went bonkers for a minute. And then we would get out of our own way and go, okay, wait, that didn't work. Let's try this. But I think, to that point, no, Alani, I think in anything, at least in my experience, in anything that you are going to forge a new path or where you are going to be a pioneer, you really have to be willing to get messy. And you have to be curious, and you also have to be vulnerable. And those three things, I think, are really key to making that work.
I love that. I think that's such a huge point. And we've talked quite a bit about how the commercial strategy leaders that we're coming across, the majority of them are first generation. They're not taking the place of, they are establishing commercial strategy in their org. And for those who haven't, because I think that it's enough of a common phrase at this point, but not everybody's established it, right? So there are still plenty of orgs that have no actual commercial kind of oversight. What landmines did you step on that you can let them know to look out for? What are those pieces that are don't get discouraged by type of pieces?
I mean, the first landmine is getting everybody on the same page. And so there was something that came about a couple of months ago where someone had said, hey, do you know anyone? We're looking for a chief commercial officer. And we really want somebody that's going to dive into revenue and marketing, but just leave sales alone. And I was like, red flag. Like that's not that, right? So I think that but that's part of it, right? Because if we go back into the dynamic of team formation, anytime you form a team, you're going to go through those 4 different stages. You're going to go through that forming, and that's just trying to get everybody to agree to be on the team together. And that's what that is. When someone says, well, we're looking for someone to do commercial strategy, but only for 2 out of the 3 departments that would participate. That's forming. And at that point, you almost can't go forward. And then that second stage of that is storming, right? And that's where I tell you, it gets messy, because in that you have to be willing to open up your books and go, okay, these are my rules of engagement in my department. Here's where I am willing to let you in. And here are those areas that I don't want you to get involved in. But it's not just up to me. There has to be that agreement, right? So that storming is where, again, you can start to see some of those boundaries are either going to be erased or they're going to be fortified, one of the two. And then, the last 2 phases of team dynamic is that norming and the performing. And that's when people are really willing to get in there and start going towards one common goal. I don't think that's easy in any organization. And I respect very much where any individual organization is finding themselves in this today, because I've heard a lot of people say, well, we want to do it, but you see, we have a CMO. So we're just going to put sales and revenue under one person, and we're just going to leave the CMO because we don't, and it's like, well, you don't have to eliminate the CMO. You don't have to eliminate the CR. You don't have to eliminate anyone, because it's not just one thing. It's the marrying together of 3 disciplines to create singular strategies that then amplify your profitability, multiply your profitability. And those people sitting in those seats and with that expertise, just at that point, the optimization is greater than it could ever be, right? Think about 3 leaders in anything in our world, 3 leaders, when they get together and they get their teams together, that's the stuff of history, right?
Absolutely. And it makes sense. Like when we look at just commercial strategy in its its bare essence, it just makes sense business wise. But it has been so slow to be adopted in our industry. Why do you think it has been so hard for us to adopt it? I mean, I know we're typically slow to adopt things in general. Is it just That's our pace.
Have you heard of Marsha? But you are like, seriously, if you ever, yeah, we're not the quickest industry to run. We don't run towards the new shiny objects a lot of the times. But the other thing I'll tell you about that is I do think that people are hungry for it. You hear it with anytime, and you know that anytime we're talking to people, everybody's talking about it. I just think there's so many reasons. Like when I look at the landscape of all the reasons why people are slow to adopt, not adopting, running to adopt, all of that, I think that there's a lot of things at play. First of all, I think there is a lot that is changing everything all at once, right? Like you've got AI, you have revenue management systems. Now you have commercial strategy systems starting to come about. Again, digital marketing continues to evolve. Every time you think you have your hand around it, you don't. So you think about all of these things that are within these three disciplines that are just changing. And then we're pushing sales. We know you guys like the way you do things, but we want you to push ahead as well. So all three disciplines are in some form of change. And then on top of it, now we want you all to work together so that we can optimize and amplify our results. And then what are those results? And what KPIs are we going to agree on? Last check, we found 67 of them with the HSMAI work group. So how are we going to agree on that? I don't think any one of those things is a bad thing. Like I believe, I'm kind of the Tao of the farmer. Like there is no good and bad. It's just, there's just a lot of opportunities everywhere because everything I just mentioned to you is another opportunity to do better, be bigger, be stronger. Every one of those. They're not landmines, they're opportunities.
Love it. I love it. And you touched on KPIs. I think that's a huge one too, because we're driven by those, right? And the development of kind of the individual disciplines have to be somehow measured in their success. But so frequently the KPIs that we've had, they block the other disciplines. In sales, I just need to sell everything. I just need to have as much business on the books as I possibly can. Revenue's going, absolutely not. We're not selling at that rate. Like I can get much higher than that, and we're not going to be hitting goals. Marketing's focusing on ROAS, which is a whole nother topic we don't have to go into today. But and we're looking at all of these different KPIs that even when we're all sitting at the same table, if our success is being measured in ways that compete with one another, then it's just going to be one more hurdle for all of us to get over.
What I've adopted, I call it the key three KPIs. I do key three with everything with my team. We used to call it the 50 things, if you'll have me for a second. And that was, how many things I used to say to my team, because you know how it is, like people will come back, they're like, we need more. That's the world of top line revenue, right? Mm-hmm. And I would say, have you done the 50 things? And what that meant were like, have you done everything you know how to do? Yes, I have. Okay, then you've done it. Then stop. Then you don't need to keep running after another thing. So we finally deduced it down to what we call the key three. And in this case with KPIs, I subscribe to that same philosophy. Find the key three KPIs for whatever it is that we are talking about and stick with those, because you can stick with 67 and it's going to exhaust you and you're never going to get you're never really going to understand your results. So I believe that if each discipline in whatever it is, right? So if it's a wedding campaign that you're doing, we just did a big wedding campaign last year and we picked what were the 3 KPIs that we were going after with this wedding campaign. And in this case, we made sure one was marketing centric, one was revenue, one was sales. And that was how, when we would do our check-ins, we would go, how is this working? Great for marketing, but revenue and wedding or revenue and sales aren't even on the map. Okay, wait a minute, we got to tweak this. And then we would go back to it. I think that is really important. The whole idea of data, I mean, that's a whole nother subject, right? If you get into KPIs, which is data, there's so much data. And you can drown in it. And that, I mean, I guess, that's the saying, the analysis paralysis. You start drowning in it and then you come up for air and you don't even remember what you were doing. So yes. I highly, highly recommend drill it down to 3 key performance indicators that you and your team can agree will tell you if you're getting there and once you've gotten there.
That's phenomenal. I love that. The key 3.
Yeah,
I wrote it down. It's amazing.
I love it too. I try to do that. I just try to do that with everything in life, because otherwise there's so much. It's too much. Yeah,
absolutely. Keep it simple. Yeah. All right. So we're about halfway in. We're about 15 minutes in at the moment. So just again, just a reminder to everyone, if you have any topics or questions, go ahead and toss those in the chat. And Jen Hill just brought up a really great point, that misconception and that commercial strategy is consolidation. And it absolutely is not. Can you kind of pull on that thread a bit?
Yeah, Jen and I have talked about this, and I feel like we're at the front of that parade. There was I was talking to a colleague of mine, and they're in an organization that hasn't yet adopted commercial strategy. And I remember I said, well, golly, that's so crazy to me, because I always thought this organization would be very quick to adopt it and would have already been like way down the road. And she said, well, what they believed was that commercial strategy is what they did during COVID, when everybody did all the jobs. And I said, oh my gosh, that's tough. I can understand how that would come about because it was all around the same time. But to Jen's point, it is absolutely not that. And I think it's really important as well that we continue to establish that these roles, revenue, sales, marketing, they should stay intact. You still need directors of revenue, directors of sales, directors of marketing. Like I said earlier, having a chief revenue officer is not a problem. Having a chief marketing officer, you don't have to have a chief commercial officer. Doing commercial strategy simply means that you're aligning the 3 disciplines under one umbrella. But how under that umbrella those lanes are defined is different, and it's unique for every company. When you look at, a company as small as Kessler, I admit it's probably a lot easier for us to do it, right? We are 11 hotels, we're already pretty much in that org pattern. If you blow that up and you go to a much larger, one of these big management companies, I don't know exactly how you do it for 70 hotels. It probably still looks very similar, but it just gets broader, right? You're dealing in regionals but again, it's a lot of regional dorms and it's regional sales moving up to a commercial leader. And maybe there's variations on that commercial leader, but Jen is right. It's not consolidation. It never has been, and it never will be. The expertise is too important.
Such an important different point to be able to make sure we focus on. So on Jason had a question about the CCO, who the CCO reports to. What does that look like? Is that uniform?
It's not uniform. I've seen it where they report to the CEO. I've seen it report to the president. I've seen it report to the COO. Haven't seen it report to us. If it starts reporting within, then I think that it gets funky to me. You can't have a CCO report to a CSO. That would be kind of upside down world a bit. But I think any variation of whoever is leading the company, I think the CCO, you're starting to see CCOs that eventually become CEOs. So I think number 2 to a CEO, number 2 to a COO makes a lot of sense, because again, in this world where that CEO, COO, president is running the operation, the CCO is running the whole top line strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and we've also talked a little bit before about ownership, and as we're talking about the challenges of implementing commercial in our industry, one of those challenges can at times be ownership and being able to communicate the value and the importance of the commercial strategy. Can you pull on that a little bit? Dive into that topic?
Yeah, if I understand you correctly, if we're talking from an owner's perspective, at least that's where I'm going to go with this for a second, because you just opened that gate right up.
Yeah.
I think from an owner's perspective, this is truly the best way to now align the organization, is to have one lead that runs the operation and one lead that runs the commercial organization. Because when you think about, again, if we think about back in the old days, it would be enough that you had a COO that had sales background, that maybe knew enough about revenue management that they could hold their own in that report out to ownership. But as things have become as complex as they are with the various systems, and more importantly, there's a reason you have certifications now in these three areas, because the information that you have to know in order to truly have expertise is insurmountable at some point. And so to believe that one person, and just one person, a COO, that's already having to be the brand ambassador, having to run the operation, having to manage, again, typically through IT and HR, that they're also going to be the expert for sales, revenue, and marketing. I think in this day and age is a bit short-sighted. Yeah. I think that's a large ask. But having those two partner together, in our world where I've seen it, it works magnificently. Because again, you're both able to speak the same language. You're both sitting at that budget table. You're both agreeing on, if I bring you this amount, this is how you're going to operate it. If you need to operate here, I've got to bring this. And that it fits together like a really good puzzle piece. But for owners, again, Noe, I think that, can you imagine that you're the owner of a hotel, and again, you have two people that you can hold very accountable to their roles versus a generalist that goes, well, I didn't have time because I was dealing with this major operational hiccup, whatever that might be.
Or even too many at the table. And because then you can have a whole lot of communication and toxic environments, finger pointing. Yeah,
it still happens.
Yeah, of course. But no, that idea of having the 2-person team to kind of divide, conquer, and but still be working in cahoots with each other, I think is really great. And it's so funny. I'm thinking of how, back in the day, sales and marketing was one position. They just, and that was when I did sales hotel side, they tacked on marketing. I knew nothing about marketing. I didn't know what I was doing there, but it was just part of the title, right? And, revenue management was just part of the reservations agent's job, or maybe the GM did it, or even the salesperson, right? It was, and so all three of these disciplines sales was really the only one that has had a seat the whole time, has had their own seat. And these other ones we've kind of like developed, and we're like, no, we're separate disciplines, and we need to separate ourselves and show that we are individual. And we've almost done it too well. It's bring us all back in.
Well, we have an example of this in the rooms division. And I just think sometimes we don't see the forest for the trees. In rooms division, that's the front office, it's housekeeping, and it's engineering. And there's experts in each of these three areas. And never would you expect that an engineer is going to come down and check someone in, nor do you expect front office to go and clean a room. It's not that they couldn't. I think that's really important to state. I've made many a bed in my time. However, I'm not the greatest at it. It's not my expertise, nor is going and fixing something. When an electrical panel blows up, don't call me. I would be the worst person to call, right? So in rooms division, we accept it exactly as it is. And we don't say, oh, it's consolidated. No, it's not. It's sales. It's front office, it's housekeeping, and it's engineering. Everybody understands that. And then typically you'll have a rooms division executive, or, some type of rooms division leader that leads all three. This is the same thing.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great analogy. That's really great.
Yeah.
I've got one other from Jason. Whether you need a CCO or a VP of commercial strategies, anything to talk how doesn't.
I mean, it's just like any title, right? I mean, it really just, I think it's more tactically, like, how do the tactics play together, but how it leads. A leader is a leader. I think that, you do have to have some expertise in one of the areas. I think that's really key. I think, in the industry, we're still trying to figure out how to define it wholly. We're all, depending on who you ask throughout the industry, there are various definitions. But the bottom line is that, you can, if you have a skill set that is already of commercial, whether it be in any one of the three disciplines, and you have enough skill to be able to sit at the table and speak the other two, you're absolutely a commercial leader. And whether we call you a VP or a director or a corporate director or a CCO, you're leading it. And the more that we can get there, the better.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, it's with the hunger, with people wanting to do this, but with really the majority of our commercial strategy leaders being first generation. And you mentioned this in the beginning, just the importance of having mentors or others that you can kind of lean on and talk about. Everyone's trudging the road for the first time. There is no path that's already been made. So everyone that's really in this position is really making the path. And I love that you've started those commercial collab calls. And what a amazing space for these leaders. And sometimes it's even people that aren't necessarily commercial strategy leaders by title. To your point, they're just doing what they can to really enforce the commercial direction in their organization, regardless of what their title is. So I think that's been amazing. How has that been for you? What have you gotten out of those calls so far?
What I love about those calls is it's much like an association of sorts. We're just really small in this moment, but we're all just trying to figure it out. And I think it's so cool. We had one person who got on, I think the very first one, and he said, I think it was a CEO. It was a CEO or a COO said to him, "You need to figure out how to roll commercial strategy out across all of our hotels." He's a revenue manager. And he got on and he's like, "I'm here because I've been told that this is what I am to do." And we were, he still comes every single month. And I feel like I've seen him evolve, his expertise, and how he's now answering other people's questions. We have one of our mentees is on the call every month. She is writing her thesis on commercial strategy. We also have, we have vendors, we've got partners. It's great. It's so well-rounded because it's not ever just about one thing, and nothing ever is, right? So I think those calls are exactly what I had hoped they would be. I thought, let's put it together because I'm still interested. I only know commercial strategy from my point of view, from what I've read, from what I've practiced. So why don't we get on the phone and see what other people think, see what other people are doing? What are they trying? And I think there's been some great best practices that have come out of those calls already. Well worth the lunch hour. That's what I can tell you. They are well worth a lunch hour.
100%. I'm writing the entire time. It's so great. Just the ideas that I glean from that, and it's little nuggets. It's, and it's that whole idea of those incremental changes that we make in the way this last time, talking about how we structure our meetings. I mean, huge.
And when you think about commercial strategy, there's a lot of meetings that go on, right? You have revenue meetings. So the revenue team is already doing revenue meetings. Now we want them to be a part of a commercial meeting. And then maybe they're going to be a part of the group pace meeting. Like it's meeting. So putting a tighter structure around those where everybody knows what they need to bring, what they need to have pre-read, and how much time we'll spend on each thing and how long the entire meeting will last. I thought it was brilliant because I've been on those meetings that go 90 minutes, 120 minutes, 180 minutes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, when am I getting my work done? Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. I sat in the next few meetings after that and I was looking at the clock and timing, like how long are we staying on this topic? Like we could probably get to the bottom of this in 2 minutes. I bet we could if we had a timer. Yeah. So that's awesome.
Smart.
Well, Lori, this is exciting. I know we plan on doing a lot more of these, getting into the topics. Of course, those commercial collab calls are going to continue to be going on, those organic conversations with the leaders in our industry. And to everyone that joined us today, thank you so much. We will follow up and send over a link to the recording of this today. And please feel free, toss over topics, pieces that you want us to dive into. We would love to hear from you. So again, Lori, thank you so much. And we'll say goodbye for now.
Bye.
Bye.